This episode contains discussions and personal accounts related to cancer, trauma, and a healing journey. It may include emotional and sensitive content regarding the experiences of battling cancer, confronting trauma, and the healing process. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Welcome to podcast episode number 7 for It's Your Story to Tell. I'm Megan Babcock, the host, and I'm here with Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for being here with me. I'm really excited about what we have to share. Not so much excited about the journey that we had to endure and that you and your husband, Mark, are currently walking out, but Lisa and I know each other from living in the same community in West Lynn. We have kids who are the same age, and they like to hang out in elementary school, which was fun. And then we have been connected through being on a cancer journey. And so last episode was with my husband, and we talked about the journey that we went on when he was diagnosed just a few days after we were married, and the bone marrow transplant that we went through. And Lisa's going to be here to share a little bit about the journey that her husband and Mark and her family, because this is, when we're walking through these hard things, it's the patient, the caregiver, all of the family members. So many people are impacted by these health journeys. So Lisa, thank you so much for being willing to join me and share your story. I know that it's going to be so helpful for people listening.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's just start out, and if you don't mind kind of telling us a little bit about your journey. I know it's been a long one because Mark's first diagnosis was how many years ago? And kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Mark was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in 2011. And that is, I kind of hate the word ocular melanoma from the standpoint that it's not melanoma that most people think about. It started in his eye, and we knew nothing about it. It's a very, very, very rare cancer. And so we knew that his eye was treatable with that tumor. And, just kind of followed the doctor's instructions and just did what we needed to do. And he ended up having a genetic test done, and he basically was given a classification of the lowest chance to metastasize. They call it 1A. And we just didn't think anything of it from 2011 until he was diagnosed with metastatic disease in 2020. And we knew that if he were to ever metastasize, that just through some reading, even though it was kind of far back in our brains that this could happen, we knew that, basically that this was a death sentence. And so we got that news during COVID and, via Zoom, kind of how we are now. And it's like, okay, you get the most devastating news of your life. We were told at that point that he had 6 months to live and to basically get his affairs in order. And we knew how devastating it was. We knew how grave the situation was. But that's kind of where it started, is back in, with the really bad part in June of 2020.
Right. Oh, so much trauma just in like COVID and the lockdowns. And, you bring up just everything was at a standstill. Even just getting into the hospital, getting treatments, everything was delayed. And I'm sure that was very anxiety provoking because you want action and like to move forward. I am actually familiar with the genetic test because I worked at Castle Bioscience, who does that test. And how was that, when you got the test, like that's the best case scenario. But there were a lot of years, right, that have passed. And so do you consider, was that a big shock for you guys? Because had you kind of felt like, oh, we're totally out of the clear? Or had someone talked to you about like, time frames of when this test might know? So you guys were just really caught off guard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that going to our ocular oncologist every year, we would just have a routine checkup. They would dilate his eye, they would do the ultrasound, and we would see the doctors that we've grown to love. And, he would get the clear, he'd be in the clear as far as his eye was concerned, and we'd walk out. And that was year after year after year. And then, kind of once you get past 5 years, you kind of think, oh, I'm fine. It just was not even a thought. And I honestly wish that the doctors would have told us that maybe there was a little bit more testing that had been done, during the years that we were kind of in those gap years. There was different things that had come to play and come out that may have bumped his genetic testing and his percentage to metastasize up a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. And so I think what I always say to people is that I wish I would have been more in the know, because I would have done things differently in our life in terms of just how maybe our nutrition, keeping stress at bay. I think stress played a really major part in Mark's life in terms of like his metastasizing. I just would have done things differently, and I would have opened more books. I would have Googled more. I would have, I call it going down the rabbit hole. I would have gone down that rabbit hole, because you just want to you want to be in the know. You want to be as knowledgeable as possible. And so, yeah, we got hit pretty hard. Our kids got hit pretty hard. And I'll tell you, we buried our head in the sand for about 3 months. It was 3 months of pure desperation and stress and depression and wanting to sleep more and all these things, because you just can't cope with the reality of it. And what I'd like to talk to you about more is just kind of when you do pull your head out of that sand, what that feels like and what you need to do. Because had I been given a little bit more of a roadmap, I would have done things completely differently. And I would like to, moving forward, be able to give other people a piece of the roadmap that I've even developed, and I've developed through friends that I know now, and just give them some hope and a guide as to how to navigate and try to survive. Because there hasn't been any survivors of Mark's cancer. There's been longer term survivors, very few, but I don't know of anybody on record that has survived his type of cancer, like actually survived, because there's just nobody. So I think Mark's going to be the first one. So I'm going to put that on record with you.
I am believing that. And, I just want to acknowledge like how it is a really painful journey. Like I said, I have walked that, with my husband, and there's a lot of stress. I am fortunate, being a nurse, that I have a lot of knowledge, or to know how to get knowledge. I know so many doctors we were able to like contact and pull strings and get things. That is not the reality for the majority of the population. And so what I love about what you are offering others is sharing your learning. And one of the things that I like to point out to people is the importance of finding purpose in your pain.
I think that sometimes you have to find a purpose, and you have to also be able to sit in your pain. And it is really hard to just kind of sit. I think that's the time where you dissect. Okay. You kind of just say, okay, are we going to fight? Are we not going to fight? People, you'd be surprised. Some people say, I'm not going to fight. I know more people that say I'm not. I shouldn't say I know more people that say I'm not. I know people who say that they're not. But I also know a lot of people that are just like, no way, I'm not going down. And the problem I find with a lot of people is that they don't have a huge support system. They don't have, they can't, like you, get into doctors at a certain period of time. And so what Mark and I did is we just learned to navigate. We jumped through hoops in terms of our insurance. We didn't have the correct insurance to travel out of state. And we knew after our, first part of our research, we knew that we had to go to Philadelphia for Mark's treatment. The doctors in Portland, where we were living at the time, did not even say, hey, there's other outlets for you. Here's where there's a facility where there's more knowledge. There's a bigger facility with more interventional radiologists, more doctors, more people who have researched this long term. And what we found, back in Portland, and I'm not saying anything bad about Portland, but I'm just saying that in terms of where we were living at the time, nobody really understood Mark's disease. I don't even know that there was maybe a couple people that were treated there, like in a couple doctors that had a couple of cases. Whereas in Philadelphia, and I want people to know, even from this podcast, I want people to know that you have an option. And it's hard to get there. Sometimes you have to jump through insurance. Sometimes you have to have doctors write letters so that you can be in network. Sometimes you have to do fundraisers to even get there because the treatment is so expensive. It's your travel. It's leaving your kids behind. It's making sure your dogs have their sitters. It's the whole shebang. It's so big. But once we started to fight, that was it. And when we finally got to his first treatment in Philadelphia, I could just see the sigh of relief. I mean, Mark's shoulders were kind of up here, and then he just I could just see him go, okay, I'm in the right spot. So I wish there was a map, and I wish more people would say, look, you are not stuck here. You're not stuck in Portland. You're not stuck in Arizona. You're not stuck on, well, the East Coast has a little bit more, but there's people all over the world trying to get to this one specialist. And, I wish more doctors had more knowledge about this, but because it is so rare, a lot of patients just, there's not enough patients to create a facility, there's just not. And so I'm telling you what, when we get our fight on, we got our fight on, and it took on a whole nother look for us. And we started out going there, and he's had 4 treatments there, and he, has now had 0 treatments for, I think we're on month 27. And that's a rarity. That's kind of unheard of too. And so, again, there's the few, but many, they've lost their lives. And through social media, through talking on the phone, through emails, through however we communicate, it's been a hard journey to watch. So we're still in the fight. I mean, we're still here. So what does that look like in terms of your stress and in terms of how you navigate, where's your hope level at, all that stuff. I mean, you've gone through it. You tell me.
Well, it's a daily journey, right? It ebbs and flows. Some days you're like, yes, we got this. And then others you're just like, I can't even, like, why? Why God? That was for me because of being in a very difficult place in my own life, and then starting on my own recovery journey with like codependency, perfectionism, and these things that were really damaging to my life, and really struggling with getting even into a relationship because of so much like fear that I had. And then when I opened myself up and felt like, wow, Brian, my husband, is just like such an answer to prayer. He's been so healing for my emotions and things that I really was missing in my life. And then to be told he also had a rare form of cancer, and luckily for us, we caught it really early, and you can hear that story. But that's the thing, prevention is important, and then paying attention to the signs of your body. He came to me and said like, hey, this muscle. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a muscle. It's a lymph node, and genetic testing for him, when they did it, actually proved that it would be deadly had it spread any further than it had, and that there was no treatment. Like, he would have not made it. And so, being in tune with your body is so important, and how we care for our body. I'm excited for us to talk about just our body is amazing. And when we take care of it and we give it the things that it needs, good sleep, lowering their stress, making sure you have good, healthy, nutritious foods. We did a lot of supplementation and juicing, and down to getting even toxic chemicals out of our house. Because while we were going a path of chemo, radiation, bone marrow transplant, I knew the importance of it supporting the immune system, so that I knew we were going to be taxing the immune system with all of this poison. And so how do we support the body as best as possible? And so tell me a little bit about that for you and Mark. I know that's a significant part of your journey, and everybody has to find what feels right for them. We were talking about this earlier. There's no one way to do this. And especially when it's rare and there's not as much research around things, it's maybe a little bit harder to find some information. But cancers act in certain ways, and we know that there's certain things that are going to make the cancer more likely.
Kind of the straw that broke the camel's back was stress. Mark's dad died. He loved his dad so much. His dad was an amazing person, amazing man of faith. And I'd always known that if Mark's dad were to pass, or when he were to pass, that Mark would go kind of downhill, but he really did. And I just watched his body just kind of take a hit. And I kind of like to fantasize and go back and think, oh gosh, if we would have managed that a little bit better. He was so far out from metastasizing. I mean, kind of rare, again, would that have happened? Well, I don't know. It gets to be like the whole woulda, shoulda, coulda. And so, once he did, and once we kind of, like I say, pulled ourselves out of that sand hole that we were in, and it was horrible. And I know people today that are at that beginning point. I think I'd mentioned to you, I talked to one yesterday, and she had just said, I just can't get out of bed, and I don't know if I can fight. And I'm telling her, you have to, you can be down there for a little while, but I don't want you to stay down there too long, is what I said to her. I said, it's okay to feel sad, to feel all these emotions, hopeless, all these things, but you've got to pull yourself back up, because your child needs you, your husband needs you. And, you deserve to be in this world, but you got to fight for it. So once we got out of that hump, it was on. And it was on sleepless nights of me just researching. And, you kind of hit a dead wall sometimes if you Google, and especially if you're going to do something more on the natural side, you kind of hit that dead wall. But I learned how to navigate through that. And some of the things that Mark started doing immediately was earthing. I've got my little earthing book here. Looks like this. And we got an EMF pad that he sleeps on. We got an EMF, pillow that just kind of just takes all the buzz, just kind of lets your cells regenerate and calm down. And I liken it, and I know you know all this, but I liken it to going to the beach and putting your feet in the sand. And how does that make you feel? I think most people feel re-energized when they go to the beach. Well, part of that is grounding and just reconnecting. and getting away from all of the noise and all of the electromagnetic field that's just being bombarded. And so that's the first thing we did. You did the same thing. Yeah. I really believe in my heart of hearts that that's something that is working.
We still sleep on it today. Like I will never not sleep on it now.
The same. I don't have a pad on my side. I need to get one. So sometimes when Mark, gets up, or if he gets up earlier than I do, I find myself rolling onto it. And honestly, I don't think it's something in my head. I go back to sleep and I sleep better. So that was just one thing we did. The other thing, I did the same thing that you did. I taught myself how to juice. And I looked up a lot of recipes for heavy metal detox. I looked up how to support the liver, how to, change your pH level in your body, how to really I think it really just comes down to keeping your immune system healthy. Okay. So it's already gone rogue. How do you keep it healthy again? So we did celery juice. We did green juice. We did, you name it. We did all these juices, a lot of powders in those juices and that kind of thing. I have to tell you, I've gotten away from it and I need to go back because they're actually very good. And it's really a meal. If you do it right, it's a meal. So that was one thing I went really strong with in the very beginning. The other thing is, like you said, a lot of supplements. But then you run into kind of this roadblock. Does this one work with this? Mark does not get chemo or radiation. That does not work on his type of cancer. So I don't have to worry about kind of ixnaying out certain supplements when he's going through that kind of treatment. And I ran into fear. I ran into complete fear about, I got to buy this. I got to buy this one. And I kind of like overstocked, right? Like, he has to do this and he has to do that. And then the pile just got to be huge. Just huge. Not only was it expensive,
I know how
but
that
it was
is.
this big barrel of things. And you know what? If you want to spend your entire day taking supplements and going around the clock, I have to take this one at 10 and this one at 2 and this one at 4. And I have to wake up in the middle of the night to take this one. That's fine. Do it. We couldn't incorporate that into our life. Right. So moving forward, we've changed that and we've learned to really pare down. A lot of what he's taking is how I feel in my gut, that what's working. Because I do see things on social media that maybe I'm thinking, oh gosh, should he be on that? Or, what are we doing? Are we doing it wrong? And I'm really just learning to follow my gut. And Mark is learning to follow his gut. And then the other part is that he's the patient. He needs to want to do all these. I don't think they're weird at all. Some people might think they're weird, but all these things that I'm coming up with, he has to want to do it.
Right. And that's hard as a caregiver. Sometimes I know for me, because there were places in my husband's journey where he was just like, I cannot drink that juice. And I had to, let him make that choice. And that's hard because I'm like, but this is like how you're going to survive. And I'm really invested in this. And so then I had to really process, he needs to trust himself too. And there's a time and a place, and we were really fortunate in our journey. Our medical oncologist had been a naturopath before.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And so she never looked at me like I was crazy. And I know that I'm in the medical profession. I've been a nurse for 20 years. People look at me all the time and think I'm crazy. I don't really care.
No, me either.
Because I'm like, well, what I'm telling you can't hurt you. It only has the potential to help you. But you have to make your choices. But I know that's hard for people going in to offices, where I'm a nurse and I'm like, I can hold my own with some of these, but I didn't have to do that. And that I know is a stress.
It is. Yeah.
We'll have to face. And That's why it's so important to be plugged in with people on the journey you can bounce things off of that are outside of just one modality, there's no one size fits all. Every body is different, right? And so coming up with an approach that is best for you versus being in the medical profession, like we kind of treat people all the same a lot of the times. It's like, these are our protocols. This is, like you were saying, this is how much time you have to live. This is, and that can be, I think, almost not helpful sometimes, because there's a lot to do with mindset. And when you don't feel empowered to take control of your own health, and it's so difficult to navigate, and you might not feel good. There's like all these variables, right? But there's cases where patients were diagnosed with cancer and given 6 weeks to live, and then they die and they do an autopsy and they didn't have cancer. So what killed them? Yeah. Right? If you get into this mindset and you shut off and you give up, your body can give up too.
Well, that goes along with, I'm sure you've watched the Heal documentary, and that's all about your mind-body connection. It's all about, and some of the practices seem a little bit goofy to me, but they really aren't, because there's a lot of things about tapping, and there's a lot of things about energy healing, and really how the mind-body connection is really the most important thing you can start with. And I will be the first person to say, even as Mark's caregiver, sometimes it's really hard. It is really hard to get your mind straight, because I don't know how you felt with Brian, but with Mark, we had kids we had one that still needed to graduate high school, and then, we were going to be empty nesters. Well, you go through your life and you have this plan, right? Here's my plan. We're going to raise the kids. It was lovely. I loved it. Loved not every second, I shouldn't lie, but I loved it. I loved being a mom. And I loved having my kids home, and I loved the sports, and I loved everything about that. But then you kind of have the next tier, and the next tier is, what does our look to get like together? And that was so blown out of the water over a Zoom call. And I remember Mark, our whole family, well, not our whole family, 2 of the kids were not in the Zoom call, but our 2 younger boys were in the Zoom call with this doctor that gave the diagnosis. And it's kind of like how we're sitting now, and there's somebody here and here, and kind of listening to this doctor. And as she gave the news, and she wasn't my favorite human, let's be very clear. And not because of the news that she delivered, it was how she delivered it. I watched our family just kind of fade out of the Zoom call, like one by one, and they were so devastated. It was me. I faded out. Our 2 younger sons faded out. And poor Mark is sitting here, like I am right now, having to just listen to the rest of what she had to say, which wasn't good, not good. And to this day, that really breaks my heart, that this is how he had to hear it, and how he had to just sit there and be polite and okay, while the rest of the family was falling apart. So I'm very mindful about how he feels about this journey. As much as I want him to do all these things that I've come up with, I'm very aware of how he perceives his mortality and what that means to him. And it's tough. It's tough on the whole family. It's tough on me. I think about it in a whole nother way. And then our kids, they think about it in a whole nother way. And so it's really important to just kind of live in the day, and to find goodness in that day, and find hope in that day, because none of us are promised tomorrow. Mark knows a little bit more about the way his looks, right? I don't. You don't. Brian had that experience. We don't know. And so now, because Mark has lived, now it'll be 3 years in June. 3 years in June is the date that he was diagnosed with the metastasis. And so he's here and he's alive and he's thriving. And so I want one person, two people to see that and say, you know what, somebody with metastatic ocular melanoma has lived this long. There's more of them. I use Mark as an example. There's more of them. And he's thriving.
Right.
So what is he doing? What is their family doing to have this happen? I don't know that any one thing is going to be right for that next person, but I at least have the information that I've gathered.
Right.
I read lots of books. I'm on the internet a lot. I believe in the power of prayer more than I can ever explain. That has been my healing source and the source for me to keep going. Because when I want to scream, when I want to cry, I can cry like a hurt animal. And I know that God is listening to me. It's how I feel. It's something that's in my heart. Not everybody believes that, but it's working for me, and how I'm coping as Mark's caregiver. It works for Mark, and how he's coping being the patient. So that's a big part of our life. When I talk about the books that I love, I have a whole stack here, but this one's my favorite, and it's the Holy Bible. Yes. And it's just what's getting me through the day to day, because like I said, we just don't know what it looks like. With metastatic ocular melanoma and in your liver, and I'm sure you know this from being a nurse, your liver filters everything, right? And so when that gets burdened, you can go downhill really, really quickly. It's a quick thing. And people have said that to me, prepare yourself if this happens. We've had the hard talks. We've had a lot of hard talks, but I don't know where I was going with that. But what I'm saying is that we have to live for today. Because we don't know. We don't know where it's going from there. So I want somebody to have hope. And you know what, Megan, you actually gave me hope with Brian, because I did follow your story very closely. You had it on social media frequently. And what I used to think is, oh my gosh, how would I feel if that was me? Well, guess what? It's me. So you start that cycle of making somebody else feel like, you know what, these things are conquerable. We can do this. Now I'm kind of becoming that person for other people. I'm getting calls from literally all over the world. Not a ton of them, but I mean, there's a good handful of people that I talk to frequently, and they just want to know. They just want to know, what are you doing? How can you do it? And I give them all the information. I just kind of lay it out. Sometimes I'll text them the information. This is what we do. I'm not saying it's going to work perfectly for you. I'm not saying it's going to work perfectly for Mark, right? In the long term, but this is what's working now. And then you go and you do your research. And if you need help during your research, just call me. That's where I'm at.
So amazing. So, if we can't avoid pain, hard things, we would love to, right? Like life just to be easy. But when we can take our difficult experiences and use it, at least it brings me some comfort that while this is hard, that others can find hope in this situation, and it's not for nothing, that you're going through this. And I think you talked about hard conversations, and I'd love to just chat a little bit about that, because our tendency is to want to avoid those negative conversations because there's a lot of fear, the what ifs. How did you feel as you guys talked through those and really faced the possibility, the good of like, this could work and we have all these years, and the really hard ones?
Well, that's a really good question. I have this saying, I ask, well, every holiday I say to Mark, I'll see you next year. So if it's a card I write him, the very bottom of the card, I say, I'll see you next year. And that's kind of been my motivation to say like, okay, I get him the next holiday. I live in reality though. We both do. I think in the hard conversations, sadly enough, I've been the one more falling apart than him. You know, just because I want to know that we're okay. Are we, I'll say, are we okay? Are we okay? And by that, I mean, are you going to stick around with me? Right. And, obviously he doesn't know the answer to that, but he's typically the one that's just really positive, and he'll say, you know what, Lisa, we're living for today. And you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to be here, for 30 more years or whatever I'm 55, he's 61. And, for as long as we can. And, those conversations are heartbreaking. They are really heartbreaking, because, like I said, you have this idea of what your life looks like. And you know what? We are rewriting the story. The story, I mean, obviously, I think it's been written for us, believe me, by our God. It's just that how we perceive it to look like. I know that little girls, they grow up, some of them, they just can't wait to get married and have kids. Other girls can't wait to be a doctor, whatever it is. Those things change and it's hard to adapt. But I think that I think you can't avoid the conversation at all. You have to have the conversation about what does life look like without you? What does life look like with our children and holidays and different things without you? What do you want them to know about you? Mark tends to be a little bit more private. And so when he does kind of spew, I take it in. He tends to be a little bit more reserved when it comes to that kind of thing, but it's just tough. It's a tough thing. And you know what? Like I think I was telling you earlier, I'm not the only one that's gone through this. You're not the only one that's gone through this. There's a lot of heartache out there. I think that my biggest hope is that my biggest wish is that people find nuggets of hope along the journey, because the journey is hard and we're still there. We're still there. I don't know. Are you guys still there? Are you guys?
So he's 4 years out, and everything has his bone marrow transplant was a perfect match. And he, that's considered a cure for his cancer. They monitor him. It's been every 4 months for 4 years. And we're just getting ready to go to every 6 months. And they monitor him, out to the 5 year. That's typically kind of the research, is they're looking at 5 years survival on things. And so, that's why it's so important on, tests and things like that, continue to stay up on what's coming, because the tests they use, they were looking at 5 years survival. And so you want to stay up to speed on what are the newest and things out there, because medicine is continuing to evolve. And so, we're always going to be continuing to stay awareness, whether it's emotional healing, physical healing, is so important, because catching something, whether it's just a small thought or a little lump, if you're aware, you can deal with it before it gets out of control. And
don't you find that in speaking to people that I know a lot of men that just don't want to go to the doctor. I think women do it too, but I think women just are a little bit more in tune with their bodies. And this doesn't feel right. Men are just a little off.
Right. And I hope that's the one thing, with Brian's story, because I made him go to the doctor. I was like, no, you're going. And then the doctor who, he was great because he did follow my intuition, but he was like, his labs all are fine. And I'm like, I want an ultrasound, and he's like, okay, there's no real reason not to do an ultrasound. They did the ultrasound, and then it was like, okay, you can go get married. And then next week when you get through that, come back and we're doing a needle biopsy and, to find all of that out. But had we waited
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing people have to just understand, is that you can't sit around too long and be in denial. That does not empower you. If you want to live in denial, that's okay, but you're choosing the outcome, the negative outcome. You're welcoming that in. So know that when you make the choice, and then you also have another choice, and that is to become empowered. Trust yourself. That's the thing, is we look to doctors, we look to nurses, medical professionals, these experts, and sometimes we forget that
we're the experts.
we are the experts of our own bodies. And by paying attention to just the smallest little things, that you can really change the direction of your life. And the hard conversations, there were a lot of those. Brian's odds weren't great, and it was when we were waiting to get a match. There was only one in the entire Be the Match database and she was in Greece.
Oh my gosh.
And she has an amazing story. She, if you didn't hear it, go listen to the episode before this, because she was going through her own journey with a family member who had cancer and ultimately died not long after having a child. And in the midst of her pain, she donated bone marrow for my husband, and so we all can be part of the giving of hope. But these hard conversations, as hard as they are, they also can bring hope, because you get to know your family, your spouse, like in a new and a different way. You won't have regrets, like if things do go the way you hope they don't go, because you've had those moments to really be present with each other.
Mark and I have always had a really good relationship, but since June of 2020, it's just a different one. It's a different relationship. He's a very happy person. He's always been a happy person. Always. I don't know how much you remember of Mark, but he's always
always having fun,
always cracking jokes. I'm kind of the same way. In fact, one of my girlfriends when I've done these podcasts, she calls me Podcast Lisa, because she only knows me as somebody that's really, really goofy. So this has been, and I said, well, this is a serious conversation, you're dying and cancer, and what do you do and how do you navigate and all that stuff. That's all serious. I know my audience. I know when to be silly and not to be silly, but I think keeping light in your life, just lightness, taking a little bit of just not being as serious in life, not just taking things day by day and laughing at the things you can laugh at, because if you can't laugh at yourself and can't laugh at some of your situations, because a lot of it's been really dire. I mean, really, like, oh my gosh, are we going to pull ourselves out of that hole? Really? And then what happens is we pull ourselves out of that hole. Typically what Mark will say is, wow, that was a God thing. That was a God thing. Lisa, did you see that? That was a God thing. And I'm like, I know, because more blessings have happened in our life than not from the start of, his metastatic disease. We went through really tough times, still have tough times, but the majority of the time has been blessings, whether it's from the community, whether it's from a friend, whether it's from a family member, whether it's to each other, that kind of thing. The other half of that is there have been disappointments in people too. And for people that you thought were there, I don't know if you went through this, for people that you thought would be there, what I've come to discover is that people don't like being uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And when your life gets messy, that's when you know who your friends are. And I have no bad feelings towards the people that I've kind of noticed that way. I call it ghosting. They'll ghost you like, oh, I can't deal with that. Oh, Mark's going to die. He has cancer, whatever the word is. They can't stay in that for very long. They're very good in the beginning. I don't know if you knew this, like if you went through this, but people are very great in the beginning. Our community came out strong for us, really, really strong. And I'll never, ever say anything bad about that. They were so good. But as time goes on, the disease doesn't go away and your situation doesn't go away. So you're still kind of stuck in the present time of coping. And we really did notice people just kind of fading off like this in the background,
Everybody has their tolerance level, right? Or their own experiences that instead of facing it and saying like, why am I uncomfortable in this? It is easier to just kind of walk away from it and hope that no one notices. And
I know,
but you notice, and it's like, yeah. And, I think in our case, it was not as long and chronic as what you're facing too, right? Because as of now, we're in that period that you were in back at the diagnosis and then the treatment, and then you have all this period of time of where life goes on, and we haven't had a metastasis, knock on wood, but I know that is, that's always a possibility. And then the fact that every chemo and radiation that he was given to treat this cancer has the potential to create additional cancers, right? And so right. I think it is so important that you really live in the moment. And I love that you pointed out, like, none of us know. And I think it's so funny. This shows the power of our mindset, I think, because we think we have every day and we're going to just go back out and have tomorrow because that's what our mind believes.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we don't know, and you could be gone before Mark.
He says that frequently. Lisa, it could be you today. And I said, I know. I'm not dumb. I know what the reality. I know what reality is. The thing is that, so we're dealing with a medical diagnosis, right? You have this and it is stuck in your liver. Your liver's not good, right? Right now, I think my liver's great. It might not be good at all. But, so in some ways I am kind of grateful that we've had this time and this journey, because we've had the talks. We've had a lot more time together that is intentional. I think it's good to be intentional. I know this with raising the kids. You go through your life and you're buzzing around and you're going to doctor's appointments and you're going to sports and, oh, Mom, can you wash this uniform for me? Oh, Mom, I forgot to bring my money for my school pictures. You get kind of caught up in the moment. I'm not getting caught up in the moment anymore. If it doesn't fit the way I think it should fit, it doesn't exist in my life anymore. Because I don't have the time for it. I don't have the time to, and really a lot of that, not the kids and not the running to sports, but there's things in your life that can become very monotonous. And I'm not stuck in minutia anymore. I don't want anything to do with it. So, there's a blessing behind all of it. And I just want that one person that's being diagnosed that knows nothing about this, because I'm telling you, you won't find very much information about it. I want them to know that they have options and there's other places that they can go in the United States. Right. Obviously I can't speak for outside of the United States, but I know the places out in the United States that you can go where they're experts. This is what they do. Right. And so, I don't want people, Mark and I would call it, we got the ham sandwich in Portland. And we didn't want the ham sandwich. We kind of wanted something a little bit better. And that's what we did. We just worked our butts off to get there. And, we could be dealing with this for the rest of his life. That's the way it looks, unless there's a cure that comes up, or unless, God decides to cure him completely. This is the way our life looks. Scans every 2 to 3 months. We wait for somebody to tell us whether it looks good or not. And then there's the plan. So far, the plan has been beautiful, just amazing. Even the doctors will call and say, I don't know, whatever you're doing a good job.
Well, I love that you're willing to share your knowledge, because navigating our medical system is so frustrating. Insurance companies, so frustrating. Being able to find information on natural things when they're getting buried, hidden, there's so much stigma around them, that giving people a place to be in a community where there's just this free flowing of information and knowledge, I think is such a gift and very empowering, and especially for someone new on the journey, because when you're new to it and you're trying to figure it out, you're already so emotionally drained that you don't have the bandwidth. So being able to have somebody give that to you, a starting place, is so amazing. I mean, I wasn't new to the natural side of medicine when things happened with Brian, or I would have been way too overwhelmed in that moment to learn it. And because I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia in college, and I had really looked at all these different ways to support myself from a natural way. I had been exposed to acupuncture and chiropractic and juicing and all of those things all the way back into my 20s. And so then here I am in this situation, and I'm thinking, wow, all the way back then I was being prepared and getting knowledge for such a time as this, that I wouldn't be able to even start the process.
Yeah. You honestly had a leg up. I knew nothing. And I think I told you earlier, I just wish that somebody would have handed me just a little pamphlet and said, okay, so here's a little bit about nutrition. Here's a little bit about doctors, other examples of where you can go. Here's a little bit about, if mentally you're struggling and you're down, here's what you do here. I just wanted a basic guide. I had nothing. And stress played a huge part. Fear. Okay. Yeah. So fear is definitely something to talk about. Fear can overwhelm you to the point of you being just not even able to move, not be able to get out of bed, not be able to eat and have proper nutrition, not be able to care for your children, not be able to care for yourself, not be able to care for your spouse that's sick. And fear did overtake me in the very beginning. It was just, I was paralyzed by fear. That's a real thing. But I want people to see that I did it. I went through it. I navigated. So guess what? Call me, text me, email me. I'll just give you the basics. And, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm just a wife that loves her husband. I do have enough to get people started and for them to just kind of take it and run with it. Whereas I had nothing. I didn't have anything, didn't know anything. I did have a few friends that were helpful and say, well, look at this or do that. And that was nice. That was good. But I just feel like everybody needs to have it's like the preparation. It's like the emergency kit for when your life goes to shit, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's so awesome that you're offering that, and you're willing to give that to others. And we will definitely, I'll get your contact info that we, whatever you're willing to share, and have it in the notes for this podcast so that people, or they can reach out to me and we can facilitate connecting with you. What are you currently doing? Did you mention, do you have like a nonprofit, or are you doing something to help people other than just, are they calling you? Like what are you doing like on social media and all of that?
So when Mark was first diagnosed, I started talking with a group of about 4 other women. Was it 3 or 4? Anyway, same disease as Mark. And they all seemed to be very open to the, some of the alternative healing practices. And I was like, okay, so, and I knew they knew about the conventional side too. So I was like, okay, so maybe let's do a Zoom call. So we did a Zoom call and we formed a little Facebook group, started with 5 of us. I think Parker my son kind of added people because I didn't even know what I was doing. It's like, here, start this. We've got one gal that's become the admin. And I am just really proud to say, and I know that kids would be like, oh, that's not very many numbers. We started with 5, and I think we are up to about 225 now.
That's like a huge percentage.
It is. It's a rare cancer, but people are kind of coming to this site for alternative therapies. We also talk about, what doctor do you go to? Do you guys do infrared sauna? Do you do HBOT? Do you do, what do you take for this? Do you take your D with a K2? Ask away. Talk about mistletoe injections. We talk about, how do you filter your water? What do you put in your water? Mark and I are firm believers in organic lemons, and just really, really, really just drinking filtered organic lemon water, and just keeping your body cleansed and the pH level to where we think it needs to be. There's just all these questions that so we have a lot of new little members, and I just think it's the greatest thing. So what happens is I'll get Mark's scans back and I'll say, look, good scans, we're 27 months out. His liver or his tumor burden is still at less than 5%. That's where we started with. And people will be like, tell me how. And so then the phone calls will come in, or just just an inbox in my Facebook or inbox in Instagram or whatever. And I just tell them to call me. Just call me and let's talk about it. And I've met friends that way. And I've met people who've bawled their eyes out to me, or said, hey, you brought me hope, or, hey, can I bring you hope? Or it's a giving and receiving in a way that where somebody just really understands what we're going through and understands that we live this daily. This is not like I'm going to wake up tomorrow after doing this with you and it's gone. This is tomorrow. This is the next day. And how do you navigate that? How do you prepare for your life like that? How do you plan for vacation when you've got scans, or you may have to be in surgery? So Mark has scans at the beginning of May. I think May 8th or something. Well, we'd have to be back in Philadelphia that next week. That's how fast. So it's not like we buy our plane tickets a year in advance, or you move that fast. So then think about it. It's financially very, very taxing. It's emotionally very taxing. It plays a role in all our entire family's head, really. And, but it's all, I always use this word, it's all figure outable. It's all figure outable. That's my favorite book. Everything is, have you read that?
I haven't read it, but my podcast producer was actually saying that just today. It's all figure outable. And it's and I heard you talk about that on the podcast that I listened into that you were on. And I'm like, that is such a good perspective, because our words matter. And when we can have that perspective, that keeps us in a growth mindset. It keeps us out of being the victim of our circumstances. It's telling yourself that you can do this. It's empowering. So I love that. I'm going to have to read the book. You're going to have to give me your list of recommended books. We'll put those in the show notes too. What's your community? What's the group called? And I want our listeners to be able to find it. And I love you were sharing that it's not just people who are struggling with the same diagnosis as Mark, but there's other people coming in to learn. How would they find you?
Well, for the Facebook site that we started, it is people with metastatic ocular melanoma. It is called Natural Mummies, and obviously it's just the word natural, and then it's M, capital M, capital U, capital M, and then IES. And MUM stands for metastatic uveal melanoma.
Okay.
And so we started that.
Okay.
It's just really a resource for people to go and just get information about what doctor are you seeing, what traditional medicine are you doing, and really just sharing feelings. A lot of it's about this journey. A lot of it is about just how you're feeling. How are you coping through the day? So, and then we'll give, like you had said, we'll give my email, and I don't even mind my phone number. Even my email is probably a better way to do it. But yeah, just that creating that site was pretty amazing. And I've really gotten to know a lot of really nice people, and they're doing the exact same thing that we're doing. They're trying to live.
So you've got the Facebook group for people who have ocular melanoma, and then you're willing to share resources with others who are on a cancer journey. I am also willing. So if people have questions there, I'm certified as a nurse in functional medicine. So I have that background in addition to just my nursing, and then anecdotal, like Lisa shared, of, walking this out with someone that you love. And then I'd love, who is the doctor that Mark sees in hospital? You talked about how that really was, getting in that place was life-changing.
Life-saving. It was life-saving. And so we go to Thomas Jefferson Hospital in downtown Philadelphia. And the doctor that we found his name is Dr. Sato. And he's got a large umbrella of other doctors that are, practice underneath of him. He's the one that's really just studied, created a lot of, inventions in terms of how to save people's lives with a treatment called immunoembolization. That's what Mark has. And Mark has been a responder to that. And anyway, the doctor if you looked up Dr. Sato, Thomas Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia, you would find that resource for being able to have the experts in that field. And that's really, if you love your doctor in your town, great. But if you want a second opinion, they are so wonderful. I'll get you in touch with the coordinator. I'll get you in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with to find out if you can just even get a second opinion. And that's a lot of times what people just recommend is get that second opinion, because sometimes you're in a state or in a town that just knows nothing about it. And maybe the doctor says they know things about it. I'm going to tell you, not very many. Not very many. There's some lovely doctors. I'm not dissing them. I'm just saying that there's very few that have treated this and treated it successfully. And there's trials all over the United States and all over the world, but you kind of want to, if you can, stay away from the trials in the very beginning and stick with some, liver directed therapies that are known to work. That's where you want to start. So anyway, I can give you that information later. That's fine.
Amazing. And we'll make sure we put all of that in the show notes. There's going to be so much information. People are going to want to check that out. Is there anything you want to share in closing with our audience before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on, first of all. But I would just say the biggest thing that people can do is just listen to your gut. We were taught that as kids. We were taught, our moms would say, hey, listen to your gut. And of course, I didn't know what that meant. I do now. Your gut, your body tells you what you need. Your body has instincts, and you just got to listen to yourself and follow your heart and your gut.
Yes. No, I agree. And, it is sometimes so, I know on my own, just personal journey, psychologically, emotionally, and all of that, I had learned to not trust myself, not listen. And I can tell you how the outcome of that is so bad. And so it's so important to be in tuned that's where that like self-awareness piece comes in. You know, I think we talked a little bit about mindfulness and meditation and all of these different things that allow for you to be in a space where you can even hear it, you know, because just like you were talking about grounding, kind of helping to quiet the noise and all of that, we live in an environment that is so stimulating that our brain is never able to just be quiet. And so training ourselves.
Sorry to interrupt that, but sitting in your pain, sitting in your joy, sitting in your pain, kind of sitting through all of that. People are very uncomfortable and they want instant gratification. I want to know how this is going to be done, sometimes you just have to sit and it will come to you. It will come to you. There's no other choice. But we've just got to sit in our pain and sit in our joy and learn to listen. Just listen to our bodies and listen to ourselves and listen to our gut instincts. So, yeah.
Thank you for making a difference in the lives of others. And you and Mark are in my prayers, have been all along, but, I'm just proud of you guys for doing the hard work of confronting the fear and living in faith. You know, you have chosen that, and then, you know, faith without works is dead. And it's like, so you take that faith and you put it into action. And it's amazing that you guys have had this time that you weren't told you would have. And so I'm believing for so much more. And I've just been honored to spend this time with you. And I thank our audience for listening, and let us know how we can support you. And we hope that the one thing we both want is that you walk away feeling hopeful and inspired to just reach out to someone, because that is a big step in and of itself. People can feel awkward or I don't want to bother people. No, do it. Reach out and don't feel bad about it, because we want to be able to put to work everything we've learned.
Yeah, I will take any call. I will. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I have a purpose, and it makes me feel like this journey wasn't for nothing, really. Obviously I'm helping my husband and I'll be here for him through thick and thin, but my heart really does hurt for others that are going through this. Caregivers, patients, the kids of the patients. I mean, we all go through it, and we can't discount our children, how they feel. So I'm here, and I love it that you're here too. And I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Have a great day. I look forward to talking to you soon. New podcasts every Friday. Listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you're ready to start your own transformation journey, visit meganbabcock.com. This podcast is intended only for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. The purpose of this podcast is not to replace the counsel of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.